Hi everyone, I'm absolutely delighted this week to be welcoming two of my former A-Star students, Jessica and Melinda. They are now both medical students and we're going to find out today all about their journey from A-level biology to med school. Hi girls, thank you so much for coming along. Was it okay to get here, the journey?
Not bad.
Melinda?
Not bad at all.
Okay, so we've got Jessica and Melinda, both A-Star A-level biology students who are now at different universities but studying the same course. So we'll start with Jessica. Whereabouts are you studying? What year are you in? And how have things been so far?
So, yeah, I'm Jessica. I'm a second year medical student at Cambridge. So far, I would say second year has definitely been a step up from first year, which was a step up from A levels. But overall, I think it's very rewarding. And when you can see the end of it, it's a very fulfilling process.
Excellent. And Melinda?
Hi, I'm a second year medical student as well at UCL, and I definitely agree. Second year is a lot harder than first year, but at least it's a bit like only 4 years to go now, so less time left. And yeah, I'm just trying to get through it.
Okay. Now, Jessica, you mentioned that it's been a step up from A level. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that? In what way was it a step up? What was the main stumbling block, if you like? What made it difficult?
I think the main thing is sort of the style of which you're being taught and learning. So at A levels, it's a lot more slow paced. At university, they basically bombard you with information very quickly, and there's not a lot of time to go over it and assimilate the information that you're learning. Not only that, it's not as structured, so you're basically left by yourself to decide how you want to learn everything. Whereas at A level, they give you what you need to know at every specific point in time, basically. So I think those are the two main things that make it slightly more difficult.
So I saw Melinda nodding along with you there, so I'm guessing you agree with what she was saying. Do you think then there's anything that you could have done differently during your A levels that would have set you up better to be able to cope with that? Or is there anything that you could have been shown maybe? What do you think?
Honestly, I think it's just because in uni it's more like self-guided than helped by like the staff, but I would prefer to have more help with staff, so I wouldn't really change what I did in A levels, but maybe near the end I could have done more like independent learning compared to just relying on like resources given by the school. So I think right now it's harder because like I'm struggling to like do everything by myself and not like get as much help.
Okay. So Jessica, at university, if you are feeling that things are getting difficult, what do you do?
So with Cambridge, there's like very good support systems around you, and be it your college or the actual university itself, there's like you have supervisors you can talk to, you have directors of studies, you still have like welfare people within the college. So there's a lot you can do. If you are struggling, you could go speak to lecturers. I personally wouldn't, but it's an option. You can. But I think the main thing you have to recognize is that everyone else is in the same situation as you, and everyone else is equally as burdened with the workload. So it kind of eases the worry when you know that like it's not only you that's struggling with the workload, basically.
So Melinda, Jessica touched upon something there. She said you could go and talk to a lecturer. I personally wouldn't. Would you?
Personally wouldn't either.
What's
Yeah.
it like? What's that difference in dynamic then between having a teacher that you can? I know that you used to come and ask me questions. So what's the difference? Why wouldn't you?
I think it's definitely like we have so many lecturers. We have one for like pretty much each like subsection of each module. You don't really have the opportunity to like develop a relationship with them. So sometimes at the end of lectures, a lot of people do go and ask a question at the end, but it's not really like it'd be like a 1 minute conversation because they've got to get to their next lecture as well. So I think that's definitely something I missed from school.
Okay. And so how do you think that you've adapted to that, Jessica?
Um, I think it sort of comes back to what Melinda was saying earlier, how you have to be slightly more independent in university. you can't rely as much on like being able to just ask the lecturer this when you have this question, especially because for certain modules you're not seeing them as often as you would see, for example, as we would see you at A levels. We're not seeing them as often, so you'd have a question and the next time it could get answered is like the next week. So you have to sort of just adapt by being slightly more independent, finding other resources, so textbooks. Again, Cambridge, we have supervisors and directors of studies we can ask, but I think the main thing is realizing that there are other places to get your answers. You can look at textbooks, you can look on the internet. You just sort of have to slightly gear your revision towards being a bit more independent and less reliant.
So Jessica used the word independent. I would suggest that there's a certain element of discipline that's needed to think to yourself, right, I've got this problem, I've got a question that I don't know the answer to, probably not just going to go and ask the person that you were delivered the lecture by. So do you think that that's right? Have you had to implement another level of discipline, or do you think you've always had that, Melinda?
I definitely think it's a lot harder to now because it's sometimes like if you have a question and you can't just get an answer straight away, you've got to force yourself to try and figure out the answer. And with already like the amount of work that you have, like it's not really the easiest thing to do. But like just like Jess said, like there's a lot of online resources that are quite good at explaining it. And like if you basically get like a video on YouTube, it's like the teacher essentially. So I think that's quite helpful. But yeah, you've definitely need that discipline to actually go and, try and find the answer.
So one of the things I tell my A-level students is that YouTube videos can be great in terms of information. You can fill yourself up with the information. The thing that it lacks, I would say, is feedback. So you don't get that feeling of, I actually get this, I understand it. You haven't got that person on the other side saying, yes, Jessica, that's right, you're going to get the answer right. So when you do that, where do you get the feedback from that says, yes, I got this, I understand it?
You sort of just have to trust yourself that you understand it, number one. Number two, when you get to doing questions, you would know if you understand it by the questions, because a lot of times the questions aren't as direct, they're very much application. So you would have to understand it to be able to answer the question. So it's one, trusting yourself. Number two, doing questions to see if you truly do understand it.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And that is something that I'm trying to instill in the students, is that exactly what Jessica says. You've got to be really honest with the feedback you get for yourself from doing the questions, because tell me if you relate to this, Melinda. Did you ever feel the comfort blanket of a mark scheme?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So what advice would you give to A-level students to try to move away from that, knowing what you know now, second year into med school, that's not going to work, is it? So how do you overcome that?
I definitely think A-levels, it was so easy to just like basically just look at the mark scheme for every answer and try and just memorize it that way instead of really understanding the content. But like Jess said, for especially med, like they make the questions so that it can't just be you memorizing it. So they'll ask about intricacies, or like they'll link about 5 different topics together. So you have to have a strong foundation in each of those topics, or else you won't be able to do it. So I think one thing maybe I should have done back then is focus more on like linking topics together and like really understanding like when you have to imply the answers instead of just memorizing answers, which would help a lot now, I think.
Okay. And what advice would you give, Jessica, to students who are preparing for A-levels now? They're less than 2 months away from their first exam. What should they be doing now?
In this period of time, this close, I think the main thing is past paper practice, especially for subjects that are so like mark scheme heavy, such as like biology, where you need to say what they want you to say. So I think past paper practice at this stage is probably one of the best things to do, because not only does it show that you understand it, it shows that you're ready for the exam, because you can know a topic. And I remember this especially for biology, you can know a topic and write down a good answer and still not get full marks because the mark scheme wants specific key buzzwords or specific things mentioned. So I think past paper practice is key at this point.
Okay. Melinda, how much exam paper preparation were you doing at this time of the year in the lead up to your A-levels?
I think all of the revision I was doing for biology especially was just exam papers questions, because I think throughout the year it's good to kind of revise your content, and then when you get to this point, especially Easter, I remember me and Jess would just look at, like, all we'd do is just get mark schemes off questions and just sit there and like analyze which words were coming up in the answers. And I think that's what really helped, because like she said, buzzwords are what they're looking for. And if you just learn content right now, you wouldn't really understand what the examiners are looking for. So I was just doing questions, yeah.
Okay, so just for the benefit of the audience, I'd just like to add that both Jessica and Melinda were super studious students throughout the course. So what about the advice that you would give to someone who hasn't necessarily been working as methodically as you throughout, and now they're at this point of the year, so they maybe haven't got that foundational knowledge? So perhaps just going straight for the exam questions wouldn't be the best option.
I would say at this point, focus on the weak areas, because there's no point trying to learn everything in such a short amount of time. So you really want to focus on the topics you don't know as well.
Love
and
that.
Yeah,
The stuff you don't know.
yeah. Another thing is just know the high yield topics. Know the topics that are very likely to come up, or that come up every year in high amounts of marks, to make sure that you're in the best position to do well.
Yeah. What about you, Melinda?
Yeah, I think just, knowing what you don't know. But I think that's really hard to do as well, because, like, especially in A level, I don't think you really, like, get much knowledge of, like, what you're bad at. So I think that's why you might need to do some past paper questions first to really identify, like, your weaknesses. But after that, just try and, honestly, it's all about time as well. So you just have to try and do as much as you can. And at the end of the day, just hope for the best, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And for you, Jessica, what learning habits that you used for A levels do you still use now? Are there any?
I think active recall, definitely, especially in medicine. There's like very obscure facts that you need to know, very specific things you need to know, and reading through notes is not going to help you learn it. So if you want to learn all the origins and insertions of the muscles of the forearm, reading through the notes is not going to help you. You have to actively recall, bring it back to mind to see if you truly remember it. So I think active recall is one thing that's definitely stuck with me from the A level period to the university time.
Good stuff. And what about you, Melinda?
Yeah, same.
Anything
I
to add?
think, active recall. But as well as that, for med, as it's more understanding concepts, I think, like, in A levels, what I do is, like, draw out mind maps, like, linking together things. And I think it was helpful for A levels, but not as much, because it's less, like, linkage. But especially in med, if you really have it in front of you and you've drawn it, so it's like active recalling it, and it's linking like 5 different topics together, it's really helpful with just understanding all the information in front of you.
Do you have many conversations about what you're learning? Do you two stay in touch, for example?
We stay in touch. We don't really talk that much about our degrees.
Okay. And what about, so what's it like at Cambridge in terms of study groups? For example, do you revise together, or do you have to be quite independent?
So we do revise together. We're kind of forced to, because we do something called supervisions, and it's like small groups of, like, it could be 2, it could be 5, 6 people, but it's basically small groups where you go over stuff you've already learned in lectures. So we have to revise together in that sense. Outside of supervisions, we do. So it depends. I think closer to the exam, we sort of revise more together. When it's like further away, so Christmas period, beginning of the year, we don't revise as much together, because then we're just really trying to consolidate what we know, get our revision notes intact. But once we get towards the Easter period, we do start grouping together, find each other's weaknesses, bounce off each other. Yeah.
So I was going to something that Melinda brought up with, or maybe it was you, about where you're putting injections and things. Would you not use each other to, like, model that while you're doing it? While you're teach it to each other, maybe?
No, yeah, we do it in that sense. So we don't do that much clinical stuff right now, because it's second year. But the clinical stuff we do, we try and, like, replicate it on each other. So especially in supervisions, they would demonstrate clinical techniques that we need to know, clinical test procedures, and we do try it on each other. But there's not that much clinical stuff right now. Yeah.
So Melinda, I feel like at the moment A-level students probably see university as quite a thing that's maybe in the distant future. They can't even imagine what it's like. Okay. So from what Jessica's just been saying about being forced to revise in groups, what of the things that you've picked up for learning at university could you impart to current A-level students that might help them, that they don't even know about?
I think there was a lot less group work compared to what I do now in university, because I think it's also just harder because obviously we're at home back in A-level, so like you're kind of just forced into your room to study. But in university, I genuinely cannot study by myself because like there's no motivation if I'm not with like someone else studying. So I think maybe doing more group work back in A-level would be helpful, especially for like identifying people's weaknesses, because a lot of the time when I don't know I'm actually like getting something wrong, my friend would pick up on that and, you know, correct me, which is so helpful and like valuable.
How do you do that, Jessica? Because you said pick up on each other's weaknesses. And the reason I ask is when I'm doing group sessions online now, what's really good is I can see their answers on the screen, mark them on the screen, but they benefit from each other because they see the mistakes the others are making. And that's actually where a lot of the learning takes place. So where's the similarity in that to what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a very similar concept. Like you see the mistake someone else has made. Number one, you don't want to make the same mistake, and number two, if you know it, you can then teach it to them. And I think being able to teach a topic to someone else shows that you truly understand it. So I think, yeah, it's just being able to teach it to them. And just adding on to what she said earlier about studying in groups and how she can't study alone, I think also it's really good for accountability, as she said. So for instance, we were in the library earlier, and basically I have a habit of like picking up my phone randomly, and
To check it.
yeah, to check it, right? And what one of my friends does, she sort of just takes my phone, puts it by the side, and it's like it helps me stay focused because now I no longer have that distraction, and I have that accountability next to me, knowing that if I was going to get distracted by my phone, she's probably going to take it, or like it's just embarrassing.
Sounds good. So when it comes to addressing the weaknesses, just to drill into that point a little bit more, are you literally just finding out they've got a weakness because you ask them a question and they get it wrong? How do you actually spot that someone's got a weakness in an area?
I think if you ask them enough questions, you'll realize if someone truly understands something. So basically, if you ask someone a question, they explain it to you, then you act like you're someone who doesn't do medicine and doesn't fully understand them, and ask them another question. And if they start like there's a lapse in it understanding, you'll realize. So I think asking it from a standpoint of I don't fully understand this topic, and then seeing if they can help you understand it, draws out whether they truly understand it. Because it's one thing to be able to just repeat what the lecturer said. It's another thing to be able to explain it from the fundamentals, in simple terms.
Which is exactly the foundation of my power hour. I don't know if you've both seen those, but we spend the first 10 minutes doing something active, and then I time them for 20 minutes and I say, they have to say to themselves, by the end of this 20 minutes, I need to be able to explain, insert photosynthesis, light dependent reaction, whatever, to my mum. Because you're right, you don't understand something if you can't explain it in simple terms to somebody else. So what do you think about that method that I use? Is that something that would work?
Yeah, I think like Jess said, yeah, like all we do in med school is especially just trying to explain to other people. So a lot of the times, what like one of the people did was all of their like friends would like make presentations for each topic and then present it to each other, and then the rest of the people would ask the presenter questions, and obviously that would test what their knowledge or not. And so you've got like clear objectives of what you want to like talk about, what you want to ask questions about, and I think it really helps with like really consolidating your learning.
Do you remember when we used to play the game? When you had to talk for as long as you could about the topic without saying I tried that with my students lately. They've never heard of it. I was quite surprised.
I don't think I'd have heard of it
Yeah.
before you. Yeah.
So, and that's the thing. I love that. I love the fact that you understand so deeply that you literally don't understand something, do you, if you can't say it to somebody else. And I try to get that across to the students is that's how to remove any exam anxiety. Because you can't be stressed about it if you feel deep inside you that you know all of the content. And is that the point that you're trying to get to, Jessica, with where you are with medicine? You want to fully grasp and grapple with everything that's going on.
I think it just gives you confidence when you know that even when people ask you questions, you still know what you're talking about. And the most important thing is to walk into the exam confident. It's basically just about mindset, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did you feel nervous before your A-levels, Melinda? Of course, we know from a biology perspective it's absolutely normal, and we can talk about the mechanism that leads to that. But how did you overcome any of the, like, let's say, normal exam jitters?
I think, I'm quite a very nervous, like, exam setting person, especially even if I know the content, just being in, like, the room with, like, examiners and everyone, like, writing is very nerve-wracking. But I think just, like, you have to do your best to go in with a good mindset, like, have breakfast, like, all of the little things that really help. And I think I didn't do any, like, revision or whatever in the morning because I think
Thought she was just going to stop at I didn't do any revision.
because the worst thing you could do is start revising something and then you realize you don't know it right before your exam and you walk in with like, oh no, I don't know this, and then that's just terrible. So trying to avoid anything that would ruin your day or ruin your mindset is the best thing you can do.
Any exam day prep tips from Jessica?
Just touching on her last point, the whole like revising in the morning. I think the main thing is when like there's groups of people and they're revising together and they're saying stuff and you're like, oh, I don't know that, and then you're now trying to add it. But it's just, I think all in all, it's going to cause more worry and confusion than it is going to add any knowledge. So I think I'm not saying don't do last minute revision, but I am saying like try and avoid getting stressed by other people's knowledge around you.
Or lack of.
Yeah.
They could, of course, not know what they're talking about. So this comes to Jessica's point of trust in yourself.
Yeah.
The only way we can really build that is to make sure every single day you're doing the things that you said you would do. What do you think about that, Melinda? Is that something that you have as part of your routine now?
Yeah, I think both of us, like in uni, there's so many lectures that you're quite behind and you need to try and catch up on lectures before you actually start revising. And the only way to really like plan it is to write down a calendar yourself. So it's something I did in A-level too, but just having like a note of what you want to do each day and making sure that you can cover all your content and then also leave time for revision really helps with also like motivating yourself, because once you finish it each day you're like, oh, like
you get that dopamine hit from ticking
like
it
you're
off.
progressing through it, so it's really fun. But I think having a good visual like tracker of where you are is important.
Jessica, did you go into it already with this mindset of you're going to do everything right? Because as an A-level student, you've just got everything right all of the time. There wasn't really ever an issue. So, and when I remember talking to Ragul, and he said that something happened around Christmas time where he realised that if I left everything, things can start to build up really quickly, and that forced him into finding new habits. Is it a work in progress for you, or has it just worked?
No, it has been a work in progress. I think you kind of have to relearn how to learn. It's really weird. You just have to relearn what works. So I think Christmas period is critical for everyone because like they're trying to get their notes intact because they don't have any lectures. So now you're just catching up, trying to get your notes intact and stuff like that. And you realize the gaps, and then you see that what you're doing doesn't work. So for instance, what I would do is read before the lecture and then make notes on it and then not come back to it. And I realized during Christmas that technique wasn't working because I was reading it for the lecture and then not reading it again. So I wasn't remembering it. I wasn't retaining it because they were just building and building. So I wasn't really retaining what I had before. So I realized after Christmas that what I had to do was, fair enough, read it before the lecture, go to the lecture, but I also had to like go over it after the lecture again, like in distant periods, because I think knowing one thing at one point in time doesn't mean you're going to know it a week down the line. So definitely going over it in the future, very important thing to do. So I think, as Robert rightly said, you do have to kind of like relearn what works, basically.
So in school, I think teachers try to implement spaced repetition to make sure you're revisiting things. How do you make sure that you're doing that with such a huge volume of content? How do you even know what you're? I guess there's not a spec checklist. So how do you wouldn't have someone saying to you, here's a checklist, you've got to tick this off, do red, amber, green, see what you know and what you don't know. How does that work when you've got so much to do?
I think, again, like a lot of our resources are just by us. And one thing that's helpful from lectures is they have like learning objectives. So kind of like spec points. So you kind of know exactly what you need to learn. But other than that, a lot of our resources are just made by older students. So like you said, spaced repetition. Basically everyone uses Anki in med school. It's just like, it's the go-to way to learning, or else you just don't know anything.
Thanks, Ali Abdul.
Yeah. Honestly, that's the only way to tackle such a big like amount of content, because it basically repeats it every day. So like you'll stop having to learn it when you fully got it in your head. So then at that point, you fully understand it. And as well as that, we have a lot of like older people's notes and like questions that they've made for themselves. So in your spare time, when you don't have time to be making your own notes and questions, you can just read through other people's notes, which I think is helpful as well.
On that, I'll ask this one to Jessica. I have an A-level student at the moment who's working really, really hard, and he uses Anki for his A-level, but he said he's finding it overwhelming because he's got this element of doubt that the bits that he doesn't know aren't coming round, because you know how it shuffles and comes back round to retest you. Are you still using it now? Did you use it for A-levels, and how would you eliminate his fears?
I didn't actually use it for A-level. I use it now. I didn't use it for A-level. I think with Anki, you kind of have to trust it, because a lot of people use it. And I think what you have to recognize is that it does bring it back round in a period of time. Like the algorithm basically calculates when it should bring it back round. So it will bring it back round eventually. I think if you are doubting that there's certain things that aren't coming back round, I think just going back to your notes would work. But again, you kind of have to trust that Anki knows what it's doing. And because so many people have used it and it's worked for them, I'm not saying that should be the reason you trust it, but I think that should give you a little bit more hope in it. The thing with at A-level, the reason why I didn't use it was simply just because I didn't know about it. So had I known about it then, I think I definitely would have used it, because I did use Quizlet, and Quizlet is similar, but not as similar in that it doesn't do the whole spaced repetition, but it is the flashcard concept.
So it's getting your active recall in and making sure you're retrieving that information from your head and making sure that you know what's going on. How do you make sure that you can actually use that information and apply it, Melinda?
Yeah, that is the problem with Anki, because I think a lot of people rely on Anki, and because it is just the same question every time, you just kind of memorize it and you don't need to understand it.
That's what I was thinking. I've seen these, even on Quizlet, when some of the answers are a lot longer than the others and you've got to pick which one it is, and your eye is just drawn to the one that's clearly the most obvious answer, but you might not have actually taken on or absorbed or understood any of the actual stuff that you needed to know.
Yeah.
So you've got that element of guessing that could get you through, and you're almost cheating yourself then, aren't you? But then what do you do about it? How do you make sure you can apply it?
I think the only way to really apply it is, like we already talked about, just explaining it to other people, because that's the only way you kind of know you really understand it. And then when you start doing questions, you clearly pick out your weakness if you're basically cheating yourself in Anki, which everyone does do. It is very easy to do that. But when you start doing questions and you see that, oh, like this topic I've been skipping on Anki and just not doing it properly, then you can go back, try and learn it properly, and then you've corrected where you've gone wrong, basically.
Have you ever used Duolingo to try and learn a language?
I have, yeah.
Is it quite similar with the way it quizzes you? I'm doing
Anki?
French on Duolingo at the moment, and if there's something that I think, no, not today, I'll just click another button. So can you do that with that? When Melinda said skip questions, can you do that?
You can. So you can skip in the sense that, like, you can put it that it comes back in 10 minutes and then keep putting it that it comes back in 10 minutes. But it will still stay there.
It's still coming for you in 10 minutes.
It will still reappear. So you can skip it, but you're not really skipping it because it's going to come up again.
Good.
Unless you just put it such that you don't want to see it again and you put like 4 months, that works. But I think you're only cheating yourself at that point.
Of course.
So,
Thanks for your honesty,
yeah.
Jess. So I want to come back, but talk to you, Jessica, about something that Melinda brought up, which was about other people's notes. Now, personally, I think that's a riskier game than being overwhelmed by Anki, because I don't know, people have different styles. How do you know they've taken down all of the points that you need? Do you not see there being more value in making the notes yourself? If you are going to make notes, do you see value in note taking? What are your thoughts on note taking?
Yeah, me personally, I make my notes. You do sort of have to be skeptical about using other people's notes, but I think there's like certain situations where using other people's notes is probably your best bet. So if you're very time pressured, close to exam, you have no notes, then your best bet is not going through all the lectures trying to make notes. It's probably using someone else's notes. But I think for me, the process of actually making notes helps me understand more than just reading someone else's notes, because now what you're doing is you're taking the way they understand it and you're trying to make yourself understand it that way. I think it's much better if you find the way that makes sense for you, rather than using.
And this is me trying to encourage my students to move away from getting the condensed down version of notes on Physics and Maths Tutor, for example, and the pre-made flashcards that you can do on Quizlet and on Physics and Maths Tutor. It's good for lastminute.com, but in terms of depth and really getting the stuff, I need people to be moving away from that. And do you remember I used to encourage you to turn everything into a question and answer?
Mm-hmm.
Smiles back around. Melinda, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that was probably like one of the most effective ways of really understanding and learning content, because you're basically also thinking like an examiner, and you're basically like, when you're just learning like notes, it's just kind of like just words. It's not really, doesn't really have a purpose. But when it's a question, you're like really trying to understand what it's asking, and you're trying to like answer it like you would in an exam. And I don't know, I think it helps with just learning it, and then you can do like reverse questions as well. So you get the answer and you try and guess what the question is. So all of it just helps with just understanding the content more.
Okay. Jessica, what about you? Is that how you would note take now still?
Yeah, so I would say I didn't actually really understand the value of what you were teaching until I got to uni. And like, because
Love that.
there's so much more content in you that you actually have to ask yourself questions. You can't just rely on reading a note and trust yourself that you'll understand it. You really do have to ask questions and answer them, because at the end of the day, in an exam, they're going to ask you questions. So yeah, I definitely think that principle is something that's really useful. I didn't recognize it at the time, but now I definitely do.
Oh, that's good. So the other thing, something new that I'm doing now that I wasn't doing when I taught you to, is voice memos. And I wanted to have a chat with you to see whether you could implement this into med life. You're laughing. So are you laughing because it's something you do? You don't understand. Fine, good. So let me explain. So do you know that you have a voice memo app on your phone? So one of the things that I say to my students is lots of them aren't having conversations about what they're learning. So they're not getting to talk about it. They're not using the vocab. So then they're not getting the keywords. So if they actually just hit record on their voice memo and then read, so like proteins is probably 2 pages, takes about 1.5 minutes to read a page. That's a 3-minute voice memo clip. And now they can just keep playing it back. So it's almost like when you play a sport, you do drills. So you were talking about football earlier. You don't just go and play the full game, do you? You're going to learn how to pass. You're going to learn how to dribble. You're going to learn how to take a penalty kick. This for me is that, breaking it down, and it's a drill that they can do every single day, so they can build up an audio book, if you like, that you can keep when you're stuck on something. Maybe it's a process like the nitrogen cycle, and you just want to put the pieces together. You just got to hit play now, rather than going back to a stack of notes. What do you think, Jessica?
I think I think the principle is very good. I think what you have to be careful is not being passive with your listening back to the voice note, because I like
then try and explain it to someone else. Yeah,
I think even when I listen to like audiobooks, I don't focus as much and I don't retain as much, because there's an element of just like sitting back and just listening, letting it go in. And even in med school, they teach us about like attention, and it's one thing to like hear something. It's another thing to actually pay attention to it. So I think
100%. Yeah.
it's just being very careful you're not getting drawn into this element of passivity.
Yes, I love that, which is why the first 10 minutes of Power Hour is voice memoing, then 20 minutes explaining that to somebody else, then do an exam question, then mark it, reflect. Is that sounding better to you, Jess?
That works. Yeah.
Good
I think
stuff.
it encapsulates all the like concepts of learning. So like you've got the notes, then you're explaining it, and then you're consolidating it, you're applying it by doing questions. So I think, it does encapsulate every aspect there is to learning something.
So on that, talking about having conversations, I know that your dad is in the medical field. I don't know what he does exactly. I just remember you telling me. And your brother, is he a doctor?
He's a medical student right now.
What year is he in?
I want to say 4th year. I may be incorrect, but I think he's in 4th year.
Does he help you?
Yeah, he does. So actually, the thing about explaining, I sometimes do it to my brother as well. As annoyed as he gets sometimes.
Because then he can pick holes in what you've done.
He can, because he's obviously a lot farther ahead. But I think it's slightly more helpful in that you then can't make a mistake, because if I was to try and make a mistake, he would pick it out. If I was to try and explain it to someone else, as much as they may not understand it, if I was to make a mistake, they can't then tell me I've made a mistake. So I think explaining to someone who knows it is also equally as important, because then your mistakes are picked out as well.
Wow, this is powerful. Yes, I hadn't actually thought about that one. That is really good. Yep. Thank you. And so, Melinda, Jessica gets to have conversations with her brother. Do you come from a medical background?
No, sadly, I don't.
And how do you think that's impacted your studies?
I think as much as like it's not that good, but even from like the start of just getting into med school, there's a very unfair advantage, I'd say, with people who have medicine in their family, especially with like work experience and all of that. And also just, understanding what you need to do for applications, like understanding what it is to be a med student. I think there's a lot of disparity, but
Maybe it's not unfair. It's just what it is.
Yeah. But I think there's definitely, you just need to be active and find ways to get around it. So like there's doctors everywhere, medical students everywhere. You just gotta also be like confident and just reach out. So I think especially like for applying to medical schools, like you've gotta basically just shoot your shot and ask anyone you can, because even if you get rejected, at least you tried to get that opportunity from them. And the same now, if like you're struggling on something, a lot of the times I've contacted older students in medical school who I don't even know that well, but they're more than happy to help out because they understand what position that I'm in, that because they were in that last year. So everyone's nice and everyone wants to help. So I just say be confident.
I love that. Shoot your shot. Let's steal that quote from Melinda. So that's really good. So that's what you've done to compensate for the fact that you didn't come from a medical background, is firstly acknowledge that, and then secondly understand that you've had to have that confidence to be able to ask for the help you need. And that's one of the things I think is the secret to success. People think that asking for help is a weakness, when actually asking the right questions is what's going to get you ultimately where you want to go. So Jessica, what advice would you give to students who are kind of quiet, reserved, they don't like answering questions in front of people, they're scared about getting things wrong? What would you say to them?
One thing my supervisor said is, if you know the answer, say it. Because also don't be selfish. It's not just for you, it's for other people as well. So I think if you're one of those people who are shy, who don't like answering questions, recognize that other people in the class will probably benefit from your answer. Number one. Number two, you will most likely benefit because you've then done the thing we spoke about, teaching. So you will benefit. And if there are errors in your answers, the teacher can pick up on it, or whoever is in charge can pick up on it. So I think recognize that it benefits everyone, not just you. It benefits the people around you. I think knowing that gives you a lot more confidence.
And I just want to come back to something you said about, which I really, really like, that you, because my the 20-minute prepare to teach it to your mum. What if your mum doesn't know anything that you're talking about? I always say to them, that's not the point. It's you're telling your brain it's something that you need to remember and it's important. Your brain's then going to put that into a way that's more manageable for you because it's all about you. But your point then about being challenged back by someone adds a new layer to that, a new dimension, which I really like. What advice would you give to Melinda if she doesn't have that person in place? Because she used the term unfair advantage, but how could she kind of get around that then? Is she going to pluck up the courage to just go and say, can I just explain this to you and see whether I get it right? What should she do?
I mean, if she did come up to me and ask me that, I would be more than happy to listen because, again, it benefits me as well. And I think things like even going back to you as a teacher is also another option. So I don't think it doesn't necessarily have to be like someone who's in that field. You can ask anyone who sort of knows anything generally about the field. But also I think it's not like such a necessary thing that like without it you're hindered basically. I think it's more so just a slight added thing that may give you a bit more confidence or may reassure you that you know what you're talking about.
What I really like about both of you that you've both touched upon today is your ability to pick out people who've already taken that path. And I think that's so important. Like looking at someone who's already got to where you want to go to say, can you help me? Because you said, I would never have thought about that when I was at school. I wouldn't have talked to someone who's 2 years above me and think, do you want to just help me with respiration? No, it just wouldn't happen. So the fact that you've acknowledged that that's a thing and that you're willing to do it, that's really powerful. So that's good. So would you say you do that more with family members or more with other students, Jessica?
I would say, especially when I'm in uni, it's more with other students because they're actively doing it right now. I mean, both are very credible options, but I would say what's more accessible at uni is actually asking people around me who are learning the same thing at the same time. Yeah, I'd definitely say that's the more reasonable option for me.
And then does your dad ring to check up on you? Does he quiz you himself or do you have to ask him? What's the dynamic there?
I mean, I would generally have to ask him because he doesn't know obviously he knows a lot more. He's actively in the field. But I would have to ask him, basically. He won't just quiz me on a random thing. Yeah.
Okay. So, Melinda, back to A-levels a little bit. So that was really good. Good insights into what you're both doing there. Thank you. Back to A-levels. Were you always sure from the moment you hit year 12 that you were going to get an A star? How confident were you entering the process, that transition from GCSE to year 12? Did you just think, oh, I'm going to get an A star no matter what?
I think with school you kind of do get a good grasp of where you're at because we had topic tests every now and then and obviously mocks and stuff. So with that you kind of know like what your goals are and what is actually achievable for you. But I think going in, I kind of was also motivated because I wanted to do medicine. So you kind of have to aim for the best. So yeah, like just being motivated but also being honest and seeing what you can actually get is the most important
So you
thing.
picked your A-levels because you knew you wanted to do medicine. Now,
Yeah.
I think, Jessica, you didn't, did you? You
Yeah.
picked the A-levels because you liked science, but you weren't sure that you wanted to do medicine. Is that right?
Yeah. I it was more so I knew the general science was more interesting to me than the other humanities or other types of subjects that lead to different courses. So I picked the subjects, but it wasn't that I picked the subjects because I wanted to do medicine. I just picked the subjects because I enjoyed them. And it happened that I ended up in medicine because down the line I figured out, okay, medicine is probably what I'm gearing towards now.
Okay. Now, where were kind of the crunch points for you, Melinda? That from your journey through year 12 and year 13, was there any point where you thought, actually, this is really hard? Obviously, now you don't think A-level's hard because you've made that leap,
Yeah.
but take yourself back to who you were then. Where were the hard points?
I would say for most medical, like people trying to get into med school from A level, I think everyone really struggles in the period between year 13, like Christmas and the like New Year, because honestly, it's not fair for people trying to do medicine, because we've got to do admissions exams to get into uni for medicine, which only we have to do. We have to do our A levels and our mocks, and we have to do our interviews. So all of those things in one, like a 2-month process, is probably the worst thing. But at that point, that's what, like, I struggled, but you've got to just understand that everyone applying to med is in the same place as you. And that's where I think time management and planning really comes in, because by just allocating kind of like, I'm going to focus on this and this one day and then move on next day, like kind of holds you accountable that you need to get each thing done, instead of like just focus on that one thing, which makes you so much further behind on everything else.
I'm so glad you brought that up, actually, because I've got students now who you'll ask them, how's your day been? Have you got done what you said you were going to do? Have you ticked all your tasks off? And they're like, I'm waiting to hear from my med school offers. I'm feeling really down because I don't know whether I've got in. And you're thinking, right, number one, I can see why you feel like that, but that's not helping, because without your A levels, you're not going to get the place anyway. So what advice would you give to that person or people, Jessica?
I think knowing what to prioritize when is very important, and realizing you can't neglect any aspect in totality. So you can't, in the name of interviews, neglect A levels, because you're doing interviews, but at the end of the day, the determinant of to whether you can actually get in is really your A levels. If you don't get the grades, you're not getting in. So I think neglecting a single aspect of it in the name of the others is probably not a great decision. So knowing what to prioritize when, and I think that I know what they mean by the period when you're waiting for offers, because it's like you don't know if all your work is in vain, which is kind of annoying. You don't know if you're working and you might not even get an offer. But at the same time, number one, you have to trust yourself, as we've been saying today. You really do have to trust yourself. And number two, you have to recognize that even if you were to, let's say, worst case scenario, you were not to get what you wanted, you're still going to have to go ahead and do the A levels. You're still going to have to do what you need to do at the end of the day. So it's best you just focus on what you can control and try and leave the stuff that out of control aside, basically.
Very wise words from Jessica. Thank you. And so, Melinda, is there anything you would do differently for your A-level process? Don't say get another teacher.
Not that. I'd say, like I think I very much relate to the student you were explaining and talking about, because I think everyone has that point where like people around you might start getting offers and you still haven't heard back, and it's very nerve-wracking, because honestly, like, you don't know what's going to happen. But like Jess said, you've got to trust yourself. And I think what I would change was probably, I think I was also the one getting very stressed by other people. So I think just kind of realizing that just because someone else got an offer before you doesn't really change anything, and you're kind of like, you're on your own path to achieving what you want. So by keeping in place and kind of just checking over yourself and just ticking all your boxes, that's your only way to achieve what you want.
Good stuff. Okay. Now, one more thing. Just a different type of student that comes into a different category that I want to talk about. So I'm working with not just one student, actually, who totally different school, totally different area, but their school predicted them an A star based on end of topic tests. And of course, you know that there's lots of, it's easy, the questions are easily accessible from certain websites to go and look at questions, look at mark schemes. Then you get a teacher who's going to use the same questions. Then they're going to get a prediction of an A star. Then they went into the exam last year and got a C. So that's another reason, another reason why we can't, like what Jessica was saying, neglect that, just thinking, focusing on that offer. I've got to get a place, because that place was not worth anything at the end of the day. So how would you encourage someone to pick themselves up from that and keep going?
So is that like they're still going to do their A levels? They're going
to resit
in a reset. Yeah, I think first thing, just acknowledge. You can't deny. Acknowledge what went wrong. Acknowledge the method you may have been using probably wasn't working, and then refocus your priorities. Basically, recognize what's important and what's urgent at the specific moment, and yeah, focus again. Basically, I don't think you can't really let bad grades like pull you down, because at the end of the day, anything can happen on any day. So I remember at the beginning, there was like a lot of tests that I just wouldn't do well in. And it wasn't a case of me not being smart or a case of the content being too much for me. It was a case of like I hadn't got my revision strategy down. So I think scores can't be like a determinant of how smart you think you are, a determinant of your mood, because it's simply just about realizing your strategy, what works for you, and following it. So I think once you realize that and once you get your strategy in place, you're basically an unstoppable student.
Oh my goodness. Wowzers. And have you got anything to add to that, Melinda?
Yeah, I
Because
think
that was quite incredible, wasn't it?
exactly, yeah. Like, by just looking at a grade, you can't just think like, this is why I am. Like, you can't accept it, because a lot of the time you're not like even in school, when they try and test you on a topic, you might not be there yet with your revision, and just because they're giving you whatever grade, that doesn't show what you are. So I think like being true to yourself and just knowing that you can achieve it if you do what you need to do, just makes sure it pays off at the end.
It's so applicable to all other areas of life, isn't it? And I feel like since teaching you two, I've become an even better teacher. And now I feel now I'm an unstoppable person, because I've found the techniques and the things that work for me, that work for students. And obviously, and that's been a learning journey for me. I've made mistakes. I did things I thought, no, that's not necessarily the best way. And then you act on feedback, and then you find better ways, and that's ultimately the only way forward, isn't it? To find a better way for you. So I really, really like that, Jessica and Melinda, collectively. So thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it, and I hope you stay in touch.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Best wishes for the future. You are going to be unstoppable medical students.